All right, so we're going to talk about the heart. We are going to add this to the lecture that goes with blood, and it will be also on your blood exam. So that's an important thing to remember. So we're going to start about the gross anatomy of the heart. Gross meaning macro. Um, so I'm going to upload these labeling worksheets individually, and then um, and then you can fill them out. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make them part of your lab. So, but they are in your textbook, so you should label them from your textbook, and any of them are fair game for not your heart exam because you don't have one of those, but for your blood exam, and they are on the quizzes. All right, so this is the anterior view of the heart. So if you opened up someone's chest, this would be what you were looking at, with the exception of the fact, and it's not the exception, but again, when we talk about anatomical terms, the left is the right and the right is the left. So this being the left side of your left is the right side of the heart, and this being your right is the left side of the heart. I encourage you that when you get an exam like this, that you sort of make a note in your mind. You won't be taking it on paper, but if you were taking it on paper, to write right on this side and left on this side, just so you can keep that in mind as you go. All right. So I'm going to go through this, and every time I go through the different structures, I'm going to talk about them in the order that they go through. The blood moves through the body, because that's one of the other things that I want you to know. So the things that you need to know for your test are the gross anatomy of the heart and the way blood moves through the heart. So blood enters, first place it goes is the right atrium. The atria are these two things that kind of look like earmuffs on the heart. It comes in the superior vena cava, which is this blue tube here, in the inferior vena cava, those are the biggest veins in your body, and goes into the right atrium. From the right atrium, it goes into the right ventricle, which is this structure here. From the right ventricle, it leaves out the pulmonary trunk, and it goes out the right and the left pulmonary arteries. As a point of interest, and something that also would be on your test, arteries go away from the heart. That is the way you will remember it. So from there, it goes to the lungs. It gets oxygen. It goes to the arteries of the lungs, the arterioles, and then the capillaries of the lungs where it's oxygenated, and then it comes back and it goes through the veins and the venules and the veins, and then it goes into the right 19 here and 6 here are the right and left pulmonary veins, and that goes to the left atrium. So that said, just remember that just like a trivia point almost, is that the pulmonary veins and arteries are the only ones where the veins carry oxygenated blood and the arteries carry deoxygenated blood. So just a little point of interest. All right, from the left atrium, it goes to the left ventricle. From the left ventricle, it goes up the aorta and out, and then you have some branching of the arteries that goes to the upper parts of the body and the arms, and then this is the ascending, this is the aortic arch, and then it goes down the descending aorta, it branches off at the kidneys and to your legs and things like that, so the inferior part of your body. All right, so if you look at the inferior part of the heart, and again, I would label this if I were you. That's a smart thing to do. It's also on your quizzes. As you're looking at this, here you still have the superior and inferior vena cava. Then you go to the right atrium. From the right atrium, it goes through the tricuspid valve. The tricuspid valve has 3 cusps on it and keeps blood from backwashing from one chamber to another. People who have problems with their valves Fortunately, in this day and age, can have them replaced by pig valves, fun fact, because they're made mostly of connective tissue, your body won't reject a pig one, so they are not in short supply like most other transplanted parts. So the valves keep blood going in one direction. If blood backflows, then the heart becomes less efficient and you end up with having some sort of heart failure. So it goes from the right side, from the right ventricle here, and you note that the right ventricle is a lot skinnier and less muscly than the left ventricle. That's because it's only pumping blood to the lungs instead of pumping blood to the whole body. So it goes from the right ventricle out the pulmonary semilunar valve, that's this valve here, which is number 7, out the pulmonary trunk, again to the right and the left pulmonary arteries, goes to the lungs, gets oxygenated, comes back, the pulmonary veins to the the left atrium, through the bicuspid valve. The bicuspid valve is also called the mitral valve. Also, fun fact, you can now call them the right and the left atrioventricular valves because that names them better. So you can call this the right atrioventricular valve and you can call this the left atrioventricular valve because they are the valves between the atria and the ventricles. So you choose. Fun fact, you have lots of names for things in anatomy, and if you haven't figured that out by now, you just have not been paying attention. So from the left ventricle, blood is going to get pumped at a very high rate out the aorta, but before that it has to pass through the aortic semilunar valves. Again, prevents backflow. It causes this to be a closed system that moves blood from like one discrete place to another. Having a 4-chambered heart is one of the things that makes you more advanced than, say, birds that have a 3-chambered heart. So, out the aortic semilunar valve, out the aorta to the body, as we said before. Other points of interest, this is the interventricular septum. The septum of the heart separates the right and the left side. There's this very small space here that in some people doesn't close all the way. You can have a teeny tiny hole in it, or you can have a quite big hole in it. It's a fairly common congenital problem, meaning that you're born with it. Actually, I had an aunt that I never met because she died in infancy. She had a hole, so she was born probably in, math. She was probably born in the late 1940s, or in the mid 1940s. She was my grandparents' first child, and she had a hole in her septum, and I would imagine it was right here. You could hear it with a stethoscope, so, doctor listens to it, and he says, Mr. and Mrs. Schulten, I'm sorry that your daughter has a hole in her heart, and she's going to live for a little bit, and then she's going to die. And they sent her home with her parents, and that's exactly what happened. So super sad, exactly what happened to, back in the day, because doing heart surgery on an infant was something that was unthinkable. Fast forward to my childhood, I grew up with a kid who lived on my street, and we would go swimming, and he had a very big scar down the entirety of his sternum. So from between his clavicles to the bottom of his sternum, where they cut him open and did this surgery and fixed the hole. Now they would do it, and I'm sure that it's a teeny tiny surgery. They go in and they just slap a little piece of Teflon in on there, and they fix the hole in their heart, and you grow up and it's not, in some places it's routine. So medical miracles are things that happen. All right. So let's see. There are sacs around the heart. They are filled with a sort of lubricant which keeps the heart from cooking as you exercise or your heart speeds up. You don't want a lot of friction. So you have a epicardium, which is on the outside. The myocardium is what you call the muscles itself. And then there's a bunch of connective tissue. If you go to some of the body worlds, they eat away the muscle and you can just see the connective tissue of the heart, and it's really fascinating and actually kind of beautiful. And then the inside of layer is the endocardium, and that's made of epithelium. And then the heart itself, sorry, got ahead of myself. So we were talking about the heart wall here, the muscles, and that's made out of cardiac muscle. And then you have a connective tissue, so the epicardium becomes sort of one with the pericardium. And the pericardium is that sac around the heart. And it attaches to the diaphragm down at the bottom, and then it's sort of up at the top. The bottom of the heart is called the apex, and the top of the heart is called the base. All right, other things that you need to know. Pulmonary circulation. So we're going to start at the alveoli of the lungs because that's where oxygen enters, and we're going to just travel through the body. So there are two main types of circulation. If we're starting at the alveoli, we're here, of the lungs. This is the pulmonary circuit where it goes from the heart to the lungs, gets oxygen, drops off carbon dioxide, comes back to the heart. The back side of that is going from the heart to the tissues of the body in the capillary beds and coming back to the heart deoxygenated, and that's called systemic. So you have a pulmonary circuit and a systemic circuit. So at the alveoli, you lose carbon dioxide, oxygen enters. We talked about this a great deal before, but the oxygen is going to bind to the heme, the iron part of the hemoglobin on the red blood cells. Another fun fact is that each red blood cell has about 280 million hemoglobin molecules. That's kind of all that they have. So now that you have oxygen on your red blood cells, they are going to go back through the pulmonary veins. Actually, the venules, pulmonary venules, and then pulmonary veins. Venules just means little veins. Then it goes to the left atrium. From the left atrium, it goes through the mitral valve to the left ventricle, or the left atrioventricular valve, or the bicuspid valve. And then, of course, I said before that the left ventricle is much more muscly in order to get blood to your whole body. All right, it exits out the pulmonary semilunar valve through the aorta. So then you have some branches. You have a subclavian artery, which is just like it sounds. It's right below the clavicle. That comes off of the brachiocephalic. That is going to supply blood to your arms. You'll have a common carotid artery, and I think that's it that you have on your diagram. And then the descending aorta comes here, branches off to go to the kidneys, and then it breaks down into iliac arteries and femoral arteries. So now you're in your systemic circulation after the left side of your heart. So it goes through the body, through the arteries. Arteries always bring blood away from the heart. That's your mnemonic device for that. And then little arteries are called arterioles. From the arterioles, and there is like a classification for it, and I don't care that you know it, but what you should know is that capillaries are the size of one red blood cell. So you can see in this diagram, I really love this even though it's in French. Is this in French? No, it's not. I have one that just like it that's in French. So you have, here you have a venule, so the blood's going this way, but you can see that the capillaries here, it's like going into a little country road where you can only drive one car at a time. And that slows down the blood, and it allows the oxygen to hop off into body cells, and it allows carbon dioxide to, and this happens through diffusion, so you don't need any energy. Carbon dioxide enters from the body cells into the blood. You'll also pick up things like nitrogenous wastes, and things like glucose and other nutrients will go into the cells. So it's a, again, multifunctional purpose, and that goes nicely with our blood unit that we were talking about before. All right, so talking about the vena cava here and here. The superior and the inferior vena cava bring blood into the right atrium. Where are we going here? Sorry. Guess I'll just tell you, huh? From the right atrium, it's going to go to the right ventricle. From the right ventricle, it goes out the pulmonary trunk to the right and the left pulmonary arteries. And it ends up at the lungs, and then you're back at your coronary circulation. So maybe that's what I meant by that. Somewhere, and I'm sorry, I'm searching through my slides right now, I have a summary of the movement of blood through the body. And it might not be on this slide, but it might be in this one. Just stick with me here. Don't write that down, because I don't care if you know that, but hold on. So, if you were to arrange these things on the test or put them in order, I would want to know the path that blood takes through the heart this way, or sorry, the blood takes through the heart and the body this way. I would be able to say what blood is oxygenated and what blood is deoxygenated and where that happens. And I would be able to start in any place, not just the right atrium. All right, I think that will do it for these notes. So if you have already turned in your blood notes, just make this a second file and submit it in the same assignment.